people are here. Dear friends, we're approaching a very difficult day, which is the first anniversary of the attack of October the 7th. And I know that there are many families here, and I think it would be appropriate perhaps if we just started at the moment by standing and just reflecting quietly about our solidarity with all those who have been detained and who are living in a moment of crisis. Thank you very much. Before I introduce the minister, I just wanted to say a couple of words. When I first spoke in the open debate, I said that the family members needed to have the time to mourn and to heal. And I have to say that I think that time has still not been granted to the victims and their families. Later in October, we met in the General Assembly to call for a ceasefire. I introduced an amendment on behalf of Canada that specifically named Hamas, condemning what they did and for the release of the hostages. And we did not quite get the 2/3 majority, but we did get over 60% of the Assembly to support that motion. So when people say to me that there was no support in the United Nations for the families and for the victims, it's not exactly true. It's also important for us to know that many of us have still kept alive this cause, and we are still very much determined that people will learn and listen from what has happened. And the minister referred specifically to it in her comments this morning in the General Assembly. In addition to the leadership of the organizations that have made such a difference, Hostage Aid Worldwide, the Raoul Wallenberg Foundation, and others, I'd also like to mention the co-sponsors of today: Argentina, Germany, the UK, and the US, as well as Canada. And we have representatives here from Czechia, Greece, Norway, Republic of Korea, Romania, Serbia, Spain, and Sri Lanka. I'm also happy that Secretary General Guterres is going to be joining us, albeit briefly because of his extraordinary schedule, but he will be coming in at some point, and I'll be introducing him as soon as he comes. He told me that he very much wanted to be here today, and then in not being able to stay, he intended absolutely no disrespect. He's just facing a schedule at the end of what's called high-level week, that he has other obligations. And I also have to say that when I introduce Minister Jolie, I'll be doing very shortly, Minister, I can say that she also has to leave after her remarks. Madame Jolie has visited with families in Israel. She's also visited with families in Canada, and in addition to the discussions today. And I can say that her leadership has been inspirational, and I'm very pleased to give Madame Jolie the floor to say a few words as we start this meeting today. Thank you very much, Minister, for joining us.
Good, thank you, Bob. Good to see all of you. Bob was referring, our fantastic ambassador, Bob Rae, was referring to the first anniversary of Hamas terrorist attacks on October 7th, coming soon. I remember that day, we all do, nearly a year ago, and within a week, my team and I were in Israel, meeting with the Canadians' families who had lost loved ones. 8 Canadians died that day. And I will remember forever the conversation I had with the family members. So we feel your pain. At the same time, I'm here also to speak today about an urgent and pressing issue, which is the global hostage crisis. And I, of course, would like to thank all those who've organized this event, from Hostage Aid Worldwide and the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights. And thank you for all that you do to pursue justice and assist hostages around the globe. I was with Erwin Cutler, a dear friend of ours, of Bob and I, in Montreal recently, and we know that Erwin has been a tireless advocate on this issue, and I know Brandon, who works with him, is here as well. And I would also like to recognize the many family members of hostages who are with us today. I refer to those that are waiting for loved ones or have lost loved ones that are here. And I know that there are some around the world. Your resilience, determination, and tireless advocacy are an inspiration for us all. Hostage taking around the world threatens to undermine the rules-based order, as we know, and this order is the foundation for international cooperation and prosperity, and it's been in place for now 80 years. Any citizen who works, travels, lives abroad is vulnerable to this threat, and we must never forget that at the heart of the situation are the victims and their loved ones. The pain and suffering you must endure is unthinkable, and yet you're extremely courageous to speak up. And as governments, we cannot forget that what we do is always about the hostages. We must honor their courage, and we must be unrelenting in our efforts to resolve their cases, protect their well-beings, and address this insidious practice so that no other have to endure what these hostages had to go through. And we know very well that addressing global challenges requires collective solutions. And without the international community standing together and doing what we can to combat this terrible practice, actors who have no qualms about taking our citizens hostages and disregarding international rules will continue to use these practices. So that is why Canada launched the Initiative Against Arbitrary Detention in State-to-State Relations now 4 years ago. The Declaration Against Arbitrary Detention is at the heart of our efforts to prevent the use of innocent individuals as pawns in geopolitical disputes. We're extremely grateful that at this point, 78 countries in the world have endorsed the declaration, and they come from all around the globe. And we hope that others will join us in this growing global coalition. And we think we can be an ally to all of those here today. Canada stands in solidarity with all of you, and we will continue to do everything that is needed to bring your loved ones home. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. This is the purpose of today's discussion, really, is to encourage a number of countries to come forward and talk about why this issue is important to their governments. But it's also a chance for us to hear directly from the organizers and the organizations that have made such a difference in bringing attention to this. And we're really very, very, very happy to see so many people here today. I want to thank the Minister very much for her comments. And now I want to introduce the next speaker, Nizar Zaka, who is really a remarkable individual who's been an advocate for the release of hostages and others who are arbitrarily detained worldwide. He does so from direct personal experience, as after attending an event in Tehran in September 2015 on the empowerment of women, he in fact was held for 4 years. Since his release, he has founded Hostage Aid Worldwide, and he seeks to use AI to identify high-risk areas for future hostage taking. Nizar, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for coming.
Excellencies, distinguished and esteemed guests. Over the past year, we have engaged in countless conversations that underscore the critical truth. Hostage-taking is not just a humanitarian issue. It's a direct threat to global security and stability. It destabilizes nations, undermines trust between governments, and fuels the machinery of terrorism and organized crime. Hostage-taking is not a regional issue. It's a global challenge that transcends borders, affecting families, communities, and nations alike. That is why the fight against hostage-taking demands the unified and coordinated effort of all UN member states. To formulate a unified response, we must stand together through global cooperation. We can develop a comprehensive, coordinated response that not only reduces the threat of hostage cases, but ensures that recovery is swift, supported, and sustainable for all affected. Together, we can move toward a world where hostage-taking no longer holds power over innocent lives. Let us commit today to this shared goal, a future where security is safeguarded and where no one suffers the devastating consequences of hostage-taking and where freedom is not a hope, but a guarantee. Thank you to our partners at the Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, who stood with us and provided invaluable support, and a special thanks to the person behind the scene who made all this happen, our colleague at Hostage Aid, Inat Levine, and the team who put this off in 3 days. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nizar, for your remarks and for the video, as well as your extraordinary leadership on behalf of hostages worldwide. Next up, I'd like to introduce U.S. Deputy Permanent Representative Ambassador Dorothy Shea. While she's only just arrived in New York, she's hit the ground absolutely running. She has a wealth of relevant experience in the region of the Middle East, including most recently as U.S. Ambassador to Lebanon, Deputy Ambassador in Egypt, and previously serving at the U.S. Consulate in Jerusalem. Dorothy, we're very much looking forward to hearing your remarks today. Thank you, Dorothy.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Bob Rae, for moderating this important discussion, and thank you all for being here with us. Thank you to Hostage Aid and the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights. These are, especially, I want to acknowledge your role, and Einat as well. And I look forward to hearing from the Secretary General as well. I think it's very important that he has dedicated his time to be with us today and for all the briefers. And I understand we'll be hearing from former Congressman Ted Deutsch and also AJC CEO, as well as obviously the family and friends of those who have been or still are hostage, or those who have been lost in hostage situations or wrongfully detained. I am in awe of what you do, your courage and your advocacy. You have turned pain into purpose. It's truly remarkable. So colleagues, we're all here today because we have a shared urgent goal, and that is to bring hostages and wrongfully detained individuals home. Now, and as we meet innocent civilians around the world who are under the lock and key of state and non-state actors, without cause and without respect for any rights, certainly without anything resembling a fair trial. To these bad actors, your loved ones are just bargaining chips. It's cynical and cruel and inhumane. They are sons and daughters, husbands and wives, parents and siblings. They're people who have endured so much unnecessary pain and suffering, and whose families lie awake at night wondering if they'll ever see their loved ones again. Let's be clear that hostage taking in all its forms is a severe violation of human rights and international law, and those responsible must be held accountable. The UN Security Council has repeatedly condemned hostage-taking as a clear violation of international law, including in resolutions 638, 2133, and many more. And the United States strongly condemns the taking of hostages and calls for their immediate and unconditional release worldwide. President Biden, Secretary Blinken, and the U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs and their teams, and us here in New York as well, we are deeply engaged on this issue. And I'm proud to say that these colleagues have worked together and have had some successes bringing hostages home. At one point, we had over 50 active cases of Americans held hostage or wrongfully detained, and that number is now down in the mid-20s. Last month, we breathed a tremendous sigh of relief when Evan Gerskovich, Paul Whelan, and Alsu Kermesheva and others were freed from Russian prisons as a result of their tireless diplomatic efforts. And just last week, Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield, my boss, had the opportunity to meet with Evan Gerskovich right here in New York to welcome him home and to thank him for his courage. But despite these breakthroughs, many Americans and many innocent people from so many countries are still being held hostage or held in wrongful detention. People like Austin Tice, whose mother, I understand, may be with us. Are you here today? I haven't met you, but I have worked on your son's case. I'd love to talk to you afterwards. Austin was doing his job as a journalist, as a truth teller, when he was taken in Syria more than a decade ago. President Biden has been clear that we will not rest until we find Austin and bring him home. We will not cease our efforts to bring all wrongfully detained Americans home, including Ryan Corbett, George Klesman, and Mahmoud Habibi. They've been detained in Afghanistan. We continue to press the Taliban for their immediate and unconditional release. Tragically, I could go on and on, naming others. People who have been ripped for their loved ones for far too long. And that includes nearly 100 people being held hostage by Hamas terrorists, including people from the United States. 1 week from today will mark the solemn one-year anniversary of October 7th, when Hamas carried out the single deadliest attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust and set a horrific conflict into motion. The United States has worked tirelessly to bring every hostage home, engaging in close coordination with 25 countries impacted by this crisis, and partnering with Qatar, Egypt, and Israel to broker an immediate ceasefire and the release of hostages, when the Security Council endorsed Resolution 2735. Unfortunately, there are still American citizens held by Hamas, and we won't stop until they are returned, including the remains of Itai Chen, Judy Weinstein, and Gad Haggai. On the 100th day of captivity, President Biden said that no one should have to endure even one day of what the hostages have gone through, much less 100 days. And here we are at nearly 365. We also continue to press Hamas to return Avera Mengistu and Hisham Asayed, and the remains of Oren Shal and Hadir Godin, all held now for over 10 years. Colleagues, the United States continues to strengthen its counterterrorism measures to prevent such incidents and dismantle networks responsible for such heinous acts. And we are committed to pursuing justice for all of those who have taken hostages or had any role in such. We are working to deter and prevent future cases of hostage taking around the world. Through the Levinson Act, the United States has the ability to sanction the perpetrators involved in wrongful detentions, and we have used it to impose financial and travel restrictions against them. Partnering with civil society, we've met with hundreds of companies to equip travelers and reduce the risk for Americans traveling abroad. Here at the UN, we are working also to deter any kind of hostage taking through diplomacy and through raising the costs to the perpetrators. We have supported Canada's efforts to rally international support for the Declaration Against Arbitrary Detention in state-to-state relations, for example, which, as we heard, now has endorsements of over 80 countries, or close to 80 countries. We've worked with similar like-minded groups on collective action, most recently to successfully pressure Russia to release unjustly detained Americans. This is a global issue that demands global action. It demands partnership and solidarity, and it's in that spirit that I want to again thank the organizers of this event. And to the families of those who are held, let me reiterate this: the United States will not stop fighting to get your loved ones back. Never. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deb, and thank you in particular for naming people and for remembering them by name. I think it's so important that we do that as we go forward. I'm very glad now to introduce my friend and colleague, the UK Permanent Representative, named Barbara Woodward. She was previously, before coming here, ambassador to China from the United Kingdom, and I can say that she's one of my okay, not allowed to have favorites, but she's a terrific ambassador and a great friend. Barbara, you're up.
Thank you very much, Bob, for those kind words. Terrific ambassador, great friend. Back to you too. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. And a particular thanks to Nizar and Hostage Aid Worldwide for convening this very important meeting today and the opportunity to speak here. Friends, I want to share a personal experience, which is 2 weeks ago, when my car died. She was a bright woman with beautiful bright eyes, a mop of curly hair, a great smile, a penchant for brightly coloured scarves. She and her partner went to Chechnya in southern Russia in 1997 to help the children who had been traumatised, a word we use very easily, but what it really means is that those children had their childhoods ripped away from them in war-torn Chechnya, living in rubble. She and her partner John had barely unpacked their car, barely unpacked the musical instruments, the toys, the big silk parachute she brought to help these children heal through play before they were seized by kidnappers one night in a night raid. They were held hostage for 14 and a half months. They were passed from kidnap gang to kidnap gang in search of a multi-million-pound ransom. They lived in appalling conditions. John was chained to a radiator while Camilla was taken out and raped in the next room. Being a hostage is a terrible experience if you live through it. It is a terrible experience for those who are on the outside, and I salute the people and the friends we have here today whose family members are held hostage in Gaza as we speak. How do I know all of this? Because as a junior diplomat in Moscow, I was part of the UK government team that was responsible for doing all we could to secure John and Camilla's release. We did that, and I will never forget the scenes at the airport when I brought John and Camilla home, when they were finally reunited with their families, their parents, Camilla's son, her sister, and all of their friends. Fast forward to today. Let's be clear, and I want to be absolutely clear again today, that we unequivocally condemn the hostage-taking by Hamas. We unequivocally condemn the appalling events of the 7th of October, whose terrible anniversary we are approaching. It's been a privilege to meet the families and friends of those who've been taken hostage. I salute your courage. I thank you for speaking out for your loved ones. We continue to demand publicly in the Security Council and across the UN, back in the UK, our demand for Hamas to release these hostages and to release the remains of those who have died in captivity. We're also working as hard as we can to secure the release of the hostages, and we thank everybody involved in those efforts, whether they are civil society organisations, but also the governments of the US, Egypt, and Qatar. We are continuing too, of course, to provide ongoing support to British families for those hostages who have some connection to the UK. But as we heard from Foreign Minister Jolie and also from Nizar himself, hostage-taking is a global phenomenon. It's a destabilising phenomenon. It goes to the very heart of a family, of a community, and of course of a country. And it feeds terrorism and organised crime. So the UK is committed to remaining at the forefront of efforts to step up, efforts to secure the release of the hostages without substantive concessions, and to strengthen to prevent any strengthening of terrorist groups to carry out attacks and incentivise further kidnaps. Here at the UN, as Dorothy said, we're working on Security Council Resolution 2133, which calls on member states to prevent terrorists from hostage-taking or directly benefiting from ransom payments, and it expresses the Security Council's determination to work to secure the release of hostages. So let me conclude by saying that the UK, both here at the UN and at home in the UK, will continue to work with NGOs and with specialist agencies in order to do all we can to provide practical and emotional support to those affected by kidnapping, and also to secure the release of hostages. So again, thank you to Hostage Aid Worldwide, thank you to Bob Rae, thank you to the Raoul Wallenberg Institute for all you are doing. We are proud and honoured to continue to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara, for those words. And in particular for your story and account at the beginning. I think all of us who've been involved in dealing with detentions of any kind know how extraordinary the work is and how emotionally challenging it is all the time. As you will have seen, we've just been joined by the Secretary General of the United Nations. Secretary General, we're very grateful for your being here today. Everyone should know that the Secretary General personally insisted on being here to be part of today's event, which, as I'm sure you all know, has been pulled together at the last minute. He's been very clear in his leadership on this. And in condemning the attack of October the 7th last year, just as they were occurring, calling for the immediate release of the hostages, as well as for pushing for immediate ceasefire. And his leadership throughout this year has been extraordinary. And I'm very delighted to be able to ask him to step forward and say a few words, knowing that he will be leaving shortly after his remarks. Thank you very much. Secretary General, if you would please take the floor.
Very good afternoon. I must apologize because it will be indeed a short presence, but unfortunately the high-level week for me has not yet finished. I am in bilateral after bilateral after bilateral after bilateral, 160 as a matter of fact. And so I managed to find a way, because I absolutely wanted to be here today to express my deep support to this initiative. The question of hostages, for me, is not an abstract or conceptual question. It is an emotional question. When I was High Commissioner for Refugees, I had two colleagues that have been taken hostages. One in Pakistan and one in Chechnya. And I had the opportunity not only to share the enormous preoccupation about what had happened to them, what would happen to them, would they be released, would not they be, but to feel how, for their families, this was an immense tragedy, because of the suffering that they were imagining the hostages were having, but also because of the uncertainty. Are they alive? Are they dead? Will they be released? And this is something that completely changes the life of people. I mean, it becomes an obsessive question, because it is fully understandable. And the level of trauma that it causes in the hostages themselves, in these two cases, that were fortunately released, but in their families and their friends, is unimaginable. And so this is something that I feel very deeply myself, especially when I have hostages under my direct responsibility. We must be very clear. To take hostages is absolutely intolerable. It is a violation of international humanitarian law. But more than that, it is something absolutely unacceptable from any point of view. And in all situations, hostages must be released immediately and unconditionally. Of course, we are living in the present context, the situation of a number of hostages in Gaza. And I had the opportunity to see in talking to their families and showing different images how horrific their conditions are and how horrendous have been the forms of violence that they were victims. And I want to express, first of all, my deep condolences to the families of those that already died, and my total solidarity to those that are hostages at the present moment. There might be also in other parts of the world, if that is the case. I extend my solidarity also to them and to their families and to their friends, because I am perfectly aware of the level of suffering that the hostages themselves and those that love them are having at the present moment. Our position has been very clear. They all must be released immediately and unconditionally. But you know that this is not happening. And so I've been following with a lot of interest and commitment. The work of the mediators, especially Qatar, but also Egypt, that have been trying an agreement of which the release of hostages will be part. Unfortunately, until now, those efforts of mediation have not led to any positive result, and the anxiety about the situation of those still remaining in captivity is, of course, enormous, I would say, for them, for their families, for their friends, and for us all. On the other hand, I'd like to say that, or to condemn, to be more clear, the fact that the International Committee of the Red Cross was not yet allowed to visit hostages. This is something clear in international humanitarian law. In all circumstances, hostages, I'm not talking about kidnappings by gangs, by criminal organizations, I'm talking about hostages in this situation are entitled to receive the visit of the International Committee of the Red Cross, and I know many of them have serious diseases, and this would be absolutely essential to guarantee that they would be allowed to have the adequate treatment. And I once again strongly appeal for the ICRC to be allowed to visit the hostages and to provide them with adequate assistance. We don't know what will happen, but our prayers, I'm sure, are all done with those taken hostages, and I hope that the horrible events we are witnessing will teach a lesson to the world for this not to be possible anymore.
We would like to present you with a token of appreciation with a challenge coin. It has a long-standing tradition in military history, but the military isn't the only service that uses them now. Challenge coins stand as a badge of honor, a reminder of brotherhood and service. This hostage aid challenge coin is used to enhance, recognize special achievements, accomplishments, and occasions, and to show appreciation. It builds close-knit, lasting bonds between people who receive it and represents unity. Dear Mr. Guterres, Hostage Aid Worldwide proudly presents you with this challenge coin to acknowledge your significant contribution against hostage-taking and unlawful detention. This challenge coin number 50 is presented to you today in recognition of your relentless efforts, incomparable commitment, and unwavering work and support to free hostages and bring them home to their families, as well as your endeavors to put an end to the hostage-taking business model. It is extraordinary people like you with tireless determination and generous hearts who gives hostages and their families the hope and strength to carry on. We are grateful for your dedication to this cause and thank you deeply for your exceptional work to support hostages and their families. Rest assured, you have made a real difference in many lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's something I do not deserve, but I'm going to apologize. I entered
Thank you very much, Secretary General, and thanks to Carol and Nicola for introducing us and for making this possible. I'm now going to turn the floor over to my German colleague, who's the Deputy Permanent Representative, Ambassador Thomas Eisen. He brings a wealth of experience ranging from Afghanistan and Pakistan, as well as the DRC, Rwanda, and Paris. All of us who work with Thomas know what a distinguished professional he is. Thomas, please take the floor.
First of all, thank you, Ambassador Rae, for the kind introduction. Speaking after the Secretary General is a challenge. I would really like to welcome you all who came today, but especially I would express my deepest respect to the courageous family members who were able to join us today. I think if we are here today gathering to address the grave international issue of hostage-taking, I think it is also a moment to listen and to remember the personal stories of loss, resilience, and hope that lie at the heart of it, and I cannot express it better than the Secretary General just did. To the family members who joined us today at this venue, I want to begin by expressing my deepest sympathy, my admiration, and my admiration for the incredible strength, courage, and bravery they have shown over the long 1 year since the 7th of October. Your presence is a testament to your unwavering love and determination, but it's also a testament to your resilience in the face of unimaginable pain. And I want to echo Ambassador Xi, you turned pain into action and determination. And I cannot begin to comprehend the anguish, the torment of not knowing where your loved ones are and when you will see them again. I must also admit I stand here together with many of my colleagues in the international community, deeply committed but struggling to find answers on how to bring your loved ones back. Over 1 long year, I have met many of your family members, had many conversations with you, those who have hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. And I can assure you that Germany will do everything in our power to get the refugees back, get them back home where they deserve to be. On the issue of hostage-taking, the practice of hostage-taking is a grave injustice. Hostage-taking is a violation of the most fundamental human rights, a flagrant violation of international humanitarian law. We have a moral obligation to work together to fight this curse. This fight will not erase the pain it's already caused to those, the victims, but this fight might prevent future hostage-taking and stop future pain. This meeting today is a step forward in that commitment, and I want to thank the organizer from the bottom of my heart for bringing us together today. So what can we do with the international community, and what can we as governments do? First and foremost, we must strip hostage-taking of any semblance of legitimacy. There is no legitimate reason for taking hostages. There's simply none. Anyone who engages in this practice is a terrorist, regardless of their clear motives and regardless of their political justifications. As states, we must respond with utmost severity to hostage-taking, and that means relentless prosecution. Those who take hostages must know that they will face the full force of the law, and there can be no ambiguity about the consequences of committing the crime of hostage-taking. To be successful, strengthening of international cooperation remains key. We need to expand our collaboration between countries, especially between courts and prosecutors. Mutual legal assistance treaties are invaluable in this regard. They help secure evidence, they allow the question of witnesses, they ensure that we can pursue justice across borders. These agreements are also powerful tools. They allow robust legal cooperation, but they also send a clear message. No one can hold innocent lives hostage without facing serious and strict repercussions. A stronger cooperation between states was also the driving idea behind the International Convention Against the Taking of Hostages, which is displayed on this panel. It was adopted by the General Assembly in 1979, and it was spearheaded at the time by Germany. Let us use this convention as a starting point. to review our joint commitment and to strengthen our cooperation against the taking of hostages. As a chairman, I also want to address a fundamental dilemma. Every state has a responsibility to protect the broader public. From this perspective, the best course of action will be to never negotiate with hostage takers. To send a clear and unwavering message that hostage taking will not achieve its goal, and to avoid creating any incentives for this crime to continue. At the same time, the state has an obligation to each individual citizen. It is our moral and legal duty not to sacrifice the individual for the greater good to protect the public, but rather to do everything in our power to free them from their harrowing situation. This is why the very first article of the German Constitution declares human dignity shall be inviolable. Respect and protect it shall be the duty of all state authority. This principle, rooted in the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, compels us morally, legally, and politically to always treat the individual as an end in themselves, never as a means to achieve other societal goals. This is the complex challenge we must navigate in our response to every hostage situation as nations and collectively. In the light of the rising number of hostage-taking incidents worldwide, it is more important than ever that we come together today. Only through international cooperation and collaboration can we hope to turn the tide against this terrible curse. I'm encouraged by the collective commitment in this group, and I look forward to the discussion ahead. Thank you very much.
Thomas, thank you so much. Argentina has also been a very valued partner in this global effort that's underway, and Argentina is a co-sponsor. I'd like to call upon their ambassador, Carlos. It's your pleasure.
Good afternoon. And first of all, thank you very much to the organizers. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I'm going to be very brief. I just would like to share with you two thoughts. The UN Charter starts with "we the people." And when we are talking about the hostages, we are talking about we the people that are not free. And that is something unacceptable. It's an act of barbarism that touches each and every one of us. So the first thought is that, as we always say at the UN, we should not leave anybody behind. We cannot leave any one of these we the people behind. And the second thought goes to the families, because you're also hostages. When somebody close to you, son, father, husband, woman, niece, grandchildren, whatever, part of your family is hostage, you are also hostage. So just to tell you that you have the sympathy of the Argentinian government, Argentinian people, myself, and particularly to all the hostages of the brutal and barbaric attack by Hamas terrorist organization of October 7th. This is unacceptable. So if you allow me, on behalf of we the people, we are with you because you are with the people. Thank you very much.
Colonel, thank you so much. We're now going to turn the floor over to some of the organizations that have been leading the effort in advocating for the release of hostages worldwide. And so now I'm going to ask you to have a look at the screen for a moment for a video produced by Hostage Aid Worldwide, the organization which these are leads.
Hostage Aid Global Hostage Report for 2024. provides insights and trends from January 1st to September 30th, 2024. And we're putting out a full report at the end of the year. We just wanted to give you a snapshot of things and how they're looking so far this year. The data in the report comes from the Hostage Metrics Engine, which is a database that HostageAid put together. It's the largest database of hostages and unlawfully detainees in the world and goes back to 1979. Looking at key events for the year, there were several major events, but none bigger than the prisoner swap in August between Germany, the US, the UK, Russia, and Belarus. HostageAid has dedicated 2024 as a year of action, and just want to quickly touch on a couple things that we've been working on. Austin Tice was an American journalist who was kidnapped in Syria in August 2012, and we wanted to look at a fresh perspective on hostage campaigns. The Free Austin Tice campaign was launched in August on the anniversary of his disappearance, and was structured as if HostageAid was looking for a loved one, and it was designed to solicit a response from the community. So we've launched the campaign in Syria and Lebanon, with a special focus on areas in Lebanon that have high populations of Syrian refugees. So far, we've had 6.7 million impressions and a very high click-through rate of 6.49%. And comparing that to the industry average of 0.56%. Next is the UN Convention Against Hostage Taking, which was adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1979. The world has changed greatly since the UN Convention remained the same. And HostageAid and partners looking for ways to address modern challenges, including cyber warfare, hybrid conflicts, and terrorism. HostageAid has expanded its operations in 2024 by opening an office in Israel. The strategic move is aimed at providing direct support to families of hostages and enhancing advocacy efforts in the region. The new office will serve as a hub for coordinating with local and international authorities, fostering collaboration, and strengthening efforts to bring hostages home safely. Next, we'll take a look at where we stand with Israel and Gaza, almost 1 year after the horrific October 7th attack. According to the latest numbers, Hamas kidnapped 233 people and brought them back to Gaza. Out of those abducted, approximately 45% were Israeli citizens, 37% were Israeli citizens with dual nationality, and 17% were foreigners. At the time of this report, approximately 75 are sadly still being held in Gaza. Next, we're going to look at our data from the year and focus on non-state actors, including non-state actors in Nigeria, Niger, and Haiti that lead abductions in 2024. According to our data, Nigerian assailants are responsible for 50% of the abductions in 2024, followed by JNIN in Niger at 33%, and 400 My Wowza gang in Haiti, which is responsible for 16.67% of abductions. Looking at releases, there were several significant releases this year, including the August prisoner swap, and events continue to unfold in Israel and Gaza throughout the year. 81% of the releases this year have been a combination of negotiated, ransom/swap, and rescue. Top nationalities released this year were US, followed by Germany, France, Italy, Poland, and Sweden. Looking at releases by non-state actors, nearly 6 in 10 of all releases this year by non-state actors were by Hamas. Over 69% of the releases by Hamas were either murdered or died in captivity. Only 30.8% of those released by Hamas in 2024 were released alive. Sadly, killed was the type of release in 50% of cases by non-state actors in 2024. 31.8% of releases were rescued, and 18.2% were negotiated releases. Next, we'll look at current hostage statistics. As of September 30th, there were 54 nationalities, including lawful permanent residents, or LPRs, held hostage or unlawfully detained around the world. US citizens, including LPRs, represented 15.43% of current cases, followed by Germany at 6.91%, United Kingdom at 6.91%, France at 5.85%, and Thailand at 5.32%. 40.4% are hostages, and 59.6% are unlawfully detained. 35.6% are dual nationals. Looking at country comparisons, this is where our data from the hostage metrics engine is very interesting. We could easily run analysis and see trends for certain occupations, various countries, and different nationalities. One example is we compared stats for hostages and unlawfully detained cases for the US, UK, and France. And we found that France has much better outcomes historically than the US or the UK. For example, in detentions, 85% UK citizens who were taken hostage or unlawfully detained were held for more than 3 years, while just 36% of French citizens were held for more than 3 years. The trend also continues for those who were killed. 14% of hostages unlawfully detained from the UK were killed. Just half that amount were killed in French cases. The stats and numbers for this obviously deserve a deeper dive and a better understanding to understand the approaches that result in the different outcomes in countries. But what we're finding with the hostage metrics engine so far is it's giving us great questions to ask. Looking historically at our arrest of hostages and unlawfully detained, Americans have been the highest nationality taken since 1979, and they represent nearly 1 in 4 of those taken globally. Americans represent 23.74% of the cases, followed by citizens of the UK at 8.09%, France at 6.36%, Germany at 5.57%, and Turkey at 4.20%. And if we look at abductions by non-state actors, what we find is at the forefront now is Hamas, responsible for 9.4% of total non-state actor hostage-taking cases around the world since 1979. And ISIS follows closely, accounting for 7.57% of cases. And that was just a brief overview. I'd like to turn back over to my colleagues, Nazar and Carol, to take it from here. Thank you very much for your time.
Tim, thank you very, very much. That was Tim Ressever, who's the former American diplomat and now the Director of Digital Initiatives for Hostage Aid Worldwide. Thank you very much, Tim, for that presentation. Colleagues, our next speaker is going to be Shahed Haran. Even before the attacks of October the 7th, Shahed was a very well-known human rights lawyer in Kibbutz Be'eri. While no introduction can do justice to her experience, I'm sharing some of these details so you can imagine the bravery she is demonstrating by not only being here, but by fighting back. In October, her life, the life of her family was dramatically changed. 7 members of her family were kidnapped from their homes and taken to Gaza, including her sister, her mother, her aunt, her 12-year-old cousin, and her sister's children aged 8 and 3. Her father was killed during the attack. Some of these relatives were released in a deal that were brokered by the United States, Qatar, and Egypt in November 2023, but her brother-in-law, Tai Shoham, remains in captivity in Gaza. So, Shahed, we turn the floor over to you and express our deepest gratitude to you for being with us today. Thank you so much.
Secretary General of the UN, distinguished delegates, honored representatives, and esteemed members of the United Nations, thank you all for being here today. My name is Shahed Haran. I was born in Kibbutz Be'eri, a place where my family's laughter once echoed and where our dreams took root. On October 7th, those dreams were shattered in ways I could have never imagined. Picture, if you will, a peaceful holiday morning. My family, my parents, my sister, her husband, and their children, a bed ahead. Sleeping soundly, the joy of the previous night's celebration still lingering in the air. None of them were aware of the fact that this ordinary morning would become the dividing line between the life we knew and the nightmare that would follow. The piercing wail of the sirens shattered the peaceful morning. In those terrifying moments, my family ran to seek shelter in the safe room. What followed were hours of unimaginable horror. My father Avshalom, a man whose love knew no boundaries, stood guard outside of the room with nothing but a kitchen knife to protect him, ready to sacrifice his life for the ones he loved. It was only after hours that he entered the safe room and joined the family from inside. Inside the room, Nave, my 8-year-old nephew, asked questions that no child should ever have to voice. Mom, are the terrorists going to kill us? The anguish in my sister's heart, as she could only answer, I don't know, is something I will never comprehend. When the terrorists began to break through the wall with a bulldozer, my brother-in-law, Tal, made an impossible decision. With incredible courage, he and my father chose to surrender, begging for mercy and hoping against all odds to save their loved ones. What followed was a scene of cruelty that will haunt us forever. My family was torn apart at gunpoint. My cousin and nephew and niece, little Yael, only 3 years old, and Naveh, only 8 years old, were brutally separated from their mother. My brave sister, in an unbelievable act of motherly instinct, fought the terrorists until she got hold of her children. For over 50 agonizing days, my mother, sister, and the children endured captivity in Gaza. When they were eventually released, our nightmare is not over. My brother-in-law, Tal Shoam, remains a captive, held for over 360 days in Gaza. Each passing moment is an eternity of worry and pain for our family. On that first morning, we lost so much. My father, Avshalom, my aunt and uncle, and his caregiver were brutally murdered. In total, 12 members of my family were affected. 3 were murdered, 8 were kidnapped and later released, and 1 still held captive. I stand before you today, not just as a victim, but as a voice echoing the anguish and hope of countless families worldwide, families like my own, who have experienced the horrible trauma of having their loved ones taken hostage. I came here today, leaving behind my traumatized family in Israel, because I have not lost faith in the United Nations. I believe its purpose and its promise of unity among nations. This arena, where countries come together to confront the most pressing global challenges, still holds immense relevance. Today, we have the opportunity to prove its relevance to those suffering. The world is watching and waiting for the United Nations to take decisive actions that will alter the course of these tragic events. The United Nations was established to promote peaceful resolutions to conflicts and address humanitarian crises. What could be a more urgent call for action than the hostages currently trapped in this crisis? This is not a political issue. It is a humanitarian imperative. Regardless of your perspectives, the return of these hostages must be a shared priority, an obligation to humanity itself. First and foremost, I believe that we must reframe the crime of hostage-taking as a multilateral issue that transcends national limitations. The responsibility to respond should not rest solely on the state from which civilians have been taken. We need to implement international pressure on a global scale. Leaving hostage crisis to be resolved solely by the two sides immediately involved is akin to leaving a victim to severe abuse to seek revenge against the abuser without the protection of law or any higher order. This approach leads only to escalation of the bloodshed. It is ugly, it is messy, and it is ineffective. The rule of law, including international law, was established to create a deterrent mechanism not based on violence. By involving the global community, we replace chaos with order, vengeance with justice, and we create a powerful, united front against those who would use innocent lives as bargaining chips. A terror organization contemplating to seize citizens needs to know that it is not only offending the state it aims to harm, but the international community as a whole. It must know that the moment it commits this crime, it triggers a series of global actions that will result in its collapse. This coordinated global response is the only effective way to combat the crime of hostage-taking. It is our best hope for a safer, more stable future where such acts are universally condemned and swiftly addressed by the international community. The time for action is now. Human beings cannot be pawns in political conflicts. Over 100 hostages from dozens of different nationalities remain in prison in Gaza, and with them, many other hostages around the world. All of them, including my brother-in-law, innocent civilians whose lives cannot be treated as legitimate tools for achieving political ends. The United Nations must take proactive measures. It must engage in ongoing discussions and mobilize task force dedicated to ensuring the safe return of all hostages. We cannot afford to wait while lives hang in the balance. Let us restore the relevance of the United Nations. Let us inspire hope and take decisive actions to bring our fellow human beings back to their loved ones. Together, we can show the world that when humanity unites, even the darkest of situations can be overcome. I thank you personally for coming, and it was very moving for me to hear all the speakers before me, but I really plead that you do anything in your power, any action that can be taken to bring the hostages back. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Shanahan, for coming, and thank you for speaking with such impact on all of us. We're now going to turn to a video, and after that, I'll introduce Deborah Tice.
Good afternoon. From my personal experience in speaking with other hostages that were held by JNIM, all of whom were kidnapped in some form of violence, my convoy was ambushed and others were attacked in their place of work or in their homes. Hostages are then taken to areas that they control, safe havens. So subsequently they are not in a rush to negotiate and can hold these hostages for long periods of time. They will, however, settle for some form of duty, be that money, prisoners exchange, or concessions from the governments. These organizations have different end goals. All the terrorist organizations have different ideologies, but they are still a global threat. Therefore, it is vital for all international communities to work together in addressing these organizational threats. The only way of doing this is by sharing information and global cooperation. Thank you.
My name is Jeff Winke. I was held as a hostage by Jane and a family group in Mali for 6.5 years. Hostage taking by terrorists and other non-state groups is trafficking in human flesh, and it is despicable. Any and all groups engaging in such tactics are wrong, plain and simple. They reduce humans to commodities for exchange. No group doing this can claim any more high ground, no matter how lofty their rhetoric or stated goals. They are criminals that should be stopped and punished.
My name is Susanna Ran, and I was kidnapped from my home in Kibbutz Be'eri on October 7th, together with my daughter and my 2 little grandkids, Nave, 8 years old, and Yula, 3 years old, still breastfeeding. The terrorists couldn't care less about the people that they kidnapped, elderly, women, children, and babies. They took 9 of my family members into Gaza as hostages. They used the hostages as human shields, typically in dense populated areas, thus endangering the innocent people around them. My son-in-law, Tal Shaman, is still a hostage in Gaza by Hamas terrorists. More than 355 horrifying days. Something that you need to understand is that hostage taking in the world is on the rise. Normalizing mass kidnapping as part of a geopolitical conflict will lead to adopting this new weapon of war by other terrorist organizations, and this will endanger the world's safety and security. I call upon the UN to establish an organ that will develop a body of knowledge about hostage-taking in the world, develop a strategy, a unified strategy, and effective tools to eliminate this phenomenon.
Thank you very much for that. I have the honor now to introduce Deborah Tice. She's the mother of Austin Tice, about whom we've already heard, who's the eldest of her 7 children. Austin was an Eagle Scout, grew up to be a U.S. Marine, and then turned his efforts towards journalism. He was among the few Americans in Syria able to cover the early days of the Civil War, but in August of 2012, he was kidnapped and is yet to be returned to his home and his family. Earlier this year, U.S. President called for Austin's release on World Press Freedom Day, and all of us here are hoping that that day will come soon. To share more of her own story about this extraordinary experience, I turn the floor over to Deborah Tice. Deborah.
So I want to thank especially Nizar for inviting me to be here, and it's been a real honor to meet the Israeli families today. I can hardly think about you without tearing up, and I can only imagine how difficult it is, and you are in our prayers always. As the mother of Austin Tice, who has been hostage in Syria for more than 12 years, I appreciate this opportunity to publicly speak about the importance of global cooperation to disrupt the circumstances which drive hostage-taking. The ongoing, heartbreaking use of humans for collateral highlights the urgent need for significant changes in the response to hostage-taking. Recently, we have seen an amazing resolution for hostage coordinated by international collaboration. Of course, each country faces unique challenges. Even so, the collective determination of nations working together has proven to be powerful in resolving these deliberate traumas. In the case of my son, Austin's ongoing hostage trauma, the absence of global coordination, support, and collaboration has no doubt delayed his return to freedom. It is responsible for us, it is reasonable for us to believe that if Austin's case had been taken up with strong coordination and joint efforts among countries and global institutions, including the United Nations, Austin might have walked free long ago. It is not too late for international cooperation, including shared intelligence, increased diplomatic pressure, and collective bargaining to facilitate and hasten his safe release. Non-state actors thrive in the absence of global unity. Clear and standard guidelines for handling hostage situations at the United Nations level would provide a framework which would ensure a swift, coordinated action for resolution. A world that stands united with baseline standards where the United Nations is truly empowered to take effective steps to discourage the very thought of using humans for collateral can put an end to the growing menace of hostage-taking. Hostage-taking is a threat to global security and to human dignity. The United Nations' unique position enables it to be more than a witness. It was created for the very purpose to be an active mediator in facilitating negotiations and brokering peace, especially when countries are in a standoff which thwarts their willingness to engage diplomatically. With all my heart, I wish our family could stand before the UN member states to request that kind of effective support for cooperation, such that would enable us to work together globally to bring Austin home. May it soon. The pain of waiting and working and hoping and begging for the return of our loved one is almost unbearable. All day, every day. The longer we, the global community, allow fragmented responses to this trauma, the more hostage takers are enabled and emboldened. The time to act is now. The role of the United Nations is imperative and cannot be overstated. Global cooperation is an attainable ideal to work against the disengagement and strife which allows hostage-taking to strive. Together, we can bring Austin and others safely home and put an end to the growing enterprise of hostage-taking. Thank you.
we want to thank you very much. We're going to have a short video on global cooperation in this regard, and then we're going to introduce our final speakers. So one last short video, and then I'll be introducing you to. Thank you very much. That message very clearly. Thank you so much for it. And build on some of these ideas that you've heard about from many of our guest speakers, as well as from the videos that we've seen. I'm now going to introduce Hugh Dugan, who brings considerable experience in these issues. He has some unique experiences. He was at the U.S. mission here to the UN, as well as having served as the presidential envoy for hostage affairs in 2019. Hugh, I'm going to turn this over to you and with some recommendations on how we can turn some of these ideas and some of these experiences into the next practical steps we can take. Please welcome you, Dugan.
Good afternoon. For protocol purposes today, I'd like to acknowledge, first of all, hostages who are with us today, who have come home, followed by families of hostages from whom we've heard today. Madam Secretary, Excellencies, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to be here. When these are called and asked me to come, I said yes, of course. And I served at the U.S. mission to the UN for 26 years, and then was privileged to serve as the acting special presidential envoy for hostage affairs, and followed by a year on the National Security Council, where I oversaw international organization affairs as well. I do hope this is being taped because we do need to hear Deborah's words over and over again. We need to hear Shaket's words over and over again, and her mother's words, because they were very compelling. Not only did they describe what we all know is a horrible reality, they offered suggestions. They were action-oriented. That's a very powerful thing, that the next steps come from those closest to the front. So I do hope that it's being taken. I do want to hear their suggestions. Again, I have a few brief suggestions, and I won't keep you long either. I don't read a speech. I try to read the room and read the audience and listen to what we've heard already. That's a privilege of no longer being at the UN. I don't have to read a set speech and listen to other set speeches and try to stay awake, so there's more interaction and discussion potential. We heard today were descriptions of humanity at its worst. And what I'd like to introduce this afternoon, just for you to take with you, that hostage taking is not only a human tragedy, it's grown into an extreme element of national security proportions. When you look at what, so to speak, deals have been struck, the extortion, not only on the human lives, the extortion against national interests is phenomenal. The leveraging that hostage taking can exert on national priorities and interests just one quick stat. We paid $1.2 billion with a B dollars to secure the release of hostages from Iran within the last year. I'm not saying it's too much, I'm not saying it's too little. I'm just saying that there's a severe national security vulnerability. And to the extent that the trend is increasing, so is that vulnerability. And we need to give our best thoughts and efforts to doctrine and to response that goes beyond individual cases. We are thrilled when a case is resolved. We take a deep breath. We have lessons to learn, and we need to take them forward to create consequences for this act and to make it just far too expensive for anyone to even consider going down that line anymore. I've written about this, and if you're so inclined, you can search online. I have a column called The UN and Beyond, in which I describe some of these national security vulnerabilities as related to hostage affairs. But today I was very happy that the distinguished ambassador from Germany identified the International Convention Against Hostage Taking, which they initiated in 1979. Many of you haven't heard of it, and in my 26 years at the UN, neither had I. Now, this begs for the next action step that I invite everybody in this room to consider taking. Obviously, the convention was not monitored or evaluated in any corner, and I'd be surprised if any of those Security Council resolutions condemning terrorism even had it as a footnote. We have to create a monitoring mechanism against that convention, and we have to evaluate it for its efficacy, if it has any. Now it's quite, 40 years now, 50 years old. It talks about hostages. Technically a hostage is somebody taken by a non-state actor. The convention doesn't elaborate about captives who have been taken by states, people whom we call legally in the United States wrongfully detained. So in the course of monitoring this convention, I would suggest that member states create a new agenda item on the UN General Assembly agenda every year. It's not hard to do. And this agenda item could be monitoring of the International Convention. It could be a long, wordy UN type of sentence that could masquerade the fact that we need to address this issue critically now because in Gaza, for instance, we have an emergency. It might be hard to say that in so many words. So I'm suggesting an international convention agenda item so that we can sit as a General Assembly, the full membership, and assess this convention, but more importantly, bring forward what's happening today so that we can talk about international cooperation and prevention, which is what the convention was designed to do. So that's my meager suggestion for this afternoon. If there are those who are interested in the technicalities of how to proceed with creating an agenda item for the entire membership to consider, I'd be happy to talk with you at any point. Thank you again for this afternoon's program.
I'm not going to take up too much of your time, we're almost done. But as recommendations that we've come up with, so based on the surveys and developments since UNGA 78 last year, and based on the symposium we held during UNGA 78, which brought together the largest and most diverse global group of former hostages, families, and subject matter experts, we would like to suggest the following recommendations, some of which have been updated and some of which are new. We do suggest creating a committee within the UN that engages members to address current issues and free hostages immediately while other procedures and matters are in progress or process. This committee would find the best way for the UN to have a platform to end hostage taking as it has become a weapon that needs to be addressed. Two, the United Nations has the potential as well as the responsibility to play a global pivotal role towards ending hostage taking. However, for a sustainable and empowered global approach, recommendations and strategies on this issue must also leverage the expertise of diverse multi-stakeholders representing all relevant and fundamental components of society, including former hostages, families, human rights organizations, civil societies, and the private sector, in addition to government entities. Together, all of their constituents have the necessary inherent power and impact to find realistic and effective solutions. As an experienced body with a successful track record of convening multi-stakeholder initiatives, the UN can facilitate the organizing of an international annual hostage forum in partnership with stakeholders to participate in dialogue and agree upon recommendations and strategies that will enable the development of a sustainable, legal, and practical framework. 3, amend the international, as has been mentioned before, to amend the International Convention Against the Taking of Hostages to have a clear deterrence mechanism and commitment from member states to work together to put an end to hostage taking and jointly fight any entity taking hostages. This convention was adopted by the UNGA in 1979 with 176 member states being party to it. And we want to amend it to address modern changes, including cyber warfare, hybrid conflicts, and terrorism. And last, we would suggest the Office of the Secretary General to appoint a hostage affairs coordinator to coordinate with the different government hostage entities around the world to share information and coordinate release of hostages. This would serve as a resource where families and member states can seek assistance in securing the release of their citizens taken hostage. And thank you so much.
This concludes the meeting today, but I just want to say a couple of things. First of all, I want to give my thanks, particularly give my thanks to the families of those who are still in captivity or those who have been killed. And say that your courage and your determination and your refusal to simply allow things to stand without fighting back is an example for all of us. And I think the second thing I want to say is that the hostage age summary of what is taking place, Dugan's very helpful recommendations, other comments that have been made, I think are things that we need to work to go forward on. And certainly from my point of view, and I can't speak for the other ambassadors here, but from Canada's point of view, we were very willing to sit down again and think about, well, what can we do? How can we take these recommendations forward? What more can we do? And I don't see that lightly. I'm ready to do this, and I know other ambassadors will be willing to do it as well. I think we all recognize that this is a situation that we simply can't leave it to the processes to unfold as if there wasn't anything we could do to try to shape what happens. Because I think your own response tells us that we can in fact shape events and we can in fact make change happen. And it's very important for us to think about that. The second thing is that I didn't want to say this at the outset, but I just wanted to say by way of conclusion that throughout this discussion today, I've been thinking of two particular situations with which I've been very much involved or very familiar with. Two former Canadian diplomats were captured in the Sahel and held in custody for many, many months. And ultimately, they were released. Bob Fowler, who was our ambassador to the United Nations, and Louis Gay, who was a long-standing ambassador in Canada's Foreign Service, both made it out. And Robert Fowler wrote about it in a book which described his experience as a captive. The other situation didn't have a good outcome. I had a very good friend in university who went to work overseas, went to work for the World Bank and other institutions globally, and he retired, and in his retirement decided to take a vote and go sailing in the Philippines, and he was captured by a group of politically motivated terrorists. They were simply attempting to get a ransom for his freedom. And together with others, he was held hostage for a long period of time. And unfortunately, together with others, he was killed. And throughout that experience, I spent many, many moments on emails and telephone calls and talking to people in government. I was not in government at the time. I was a lawyer in private practice, and also talking to his family and his family here in New York and elsewhere. And it was a horrific situation. And what struck me at the time was that there was no coordination. There was no organized thinking way of saying, well, what do we do? Families were very much on their own dealing with the situation. And it is something that we all have to think about, how we can respond more effectively, not only in our own governments, but also internationally, in an attempt to deal with the impact that these events can have. And so I've been thinking of my friend John Griswold ever since, and I've been thinking about him particularly today and about his family, because I think there are some things we actually can do better and more effectively with some better results and more real results. And I'm particularly moved by what Shaka said. There is a difference between justice and vengeance. We're not talking vengeance today. We're talking justice. And it's justice that we're looking for and justice that we seek to find. And I think we all have to keep working in that direction. Thank you all very much for coming. Appreciate it very much.
I don't know how to stop it. Sorry. Did it go well? Okay.